survivor, cheating death in the wilderness. A spy master, skilled in the arts of deception. Marriage and war were key to his advancement, yet he secretly loved another woman and lost more battles than he won. He is America's first president, George Washington. Recent discoveries are shedding new light on this legendary figure, yielding startling facts about the original founding father. He's as familiar as the face on the dollar bill. George Washington, war hero, president, the father of his country. Most everyone knows this great man, or thinks they do. But we're continuing to learn that much of what we thought is fact is actually fiction. People made up things during and after his lifetime. He went from being a man to an icon. Today, archaeologists, anthropologists, and historians are uncovering new clues about the real George Washington. Their high-tech tools and investigative work are peeling back the layers on our first president, shattering long-held beliefs. Like his brilliance as a field commander, when in fact, he was only a mediocre tactician. His legendary honesty, when he told a great many lies and smiled as he did so. His passion for freedom versus his pursuit of runaway slaves. And his disregard for glory, when ambition ruled his early years. We think of him as colonial aristocracy, but his roots are much more common, for Washington doesn't grow up on the vast Mount Vernon estate he'll later own. His boyhood home lies 40 miles to the south, its exact location a mystery, until now.
It looks to me like it's probably from the chimney, but higher up, like above the stone base.
Fredericksburg, Virginia. A team of archaeologists, funded by the National Geographic Society, have discovered the forgotten remains of George Washington's childhood home.
A little to your left. We're at 9 on the dot.
They're combing the site for clues about his early years, hoping to set the record straight on his legendary youth. A deep mythology centers on this landscape. And only now do archaeologists have something tangible to work with. The team has unearthed 2 cellars, along with a collection of incredible artifacts. Archaeologists will analyze these finds for years, but the research has already shattered some long-standing myths. Take one common misconception: that Washington's a man born into privilege, only reluctantly accepting the greatness thrust upon him. Most think that Washington is born into the very top echelons of Virginia gentry. But that's not the case. In reality, he starts out neither wealthy nor modest, but as an ambitious youth, faced with tragedies he must struggle to overcome. Archaeologists working the dig site have found evidence of one of these traumatic events. At first glance, it seems like an ordinary cooking hearth.
What's different about this, though, and what caught our eye immediately, was that instead of having the usual amount of domestic debris, animal bones from the cook fire, ceramics, things like that you'd expect to see in something associated with cooking, there was almost none of that. It's very clean. Instead, what we have in large number are fragments of ceiling plaster, and all burned. what that's telling us is that we're looking at something kind of catastrophic.
Washington's correspondence hints that a fire struck his childhood home on Christmas Eve, 1740, destroying much of the living quarters. He's only 8 years old, and life has already dealt him a severe blow. But his path to success is soon blocked by a greater obstacle: the death of his father. Washington is devastated by his father's death. Without that man to guide him, he's cast adrift in the world. There's no longer any financial support, nor the prospect of an English education, the type that people of his standing in society would expect. But the young Virginian is determined to create his own destiny. He has a tremendous desire for glory, fame, and to be at the top of the social ladder. His great skill is to cover this ambition by appearing at all times exceedingly modest. At 16, Washington embarks on a bold career path, charting the properties of rich landowners. Surveying is perfectly in line with his ambitions. It allows him to rub elbows with influential families. At the same time, he can scout potential acreage for himself. Even though Washington is thought of as an Eastern planter, he's America's first Western hero. He knows that the future lies to the west. Mastering the frontier will give his resume a critical boost. But on the brink of the French and Indian War, he remains dangerously naive. His ambition blinds him to the frontier's perils, and the risks he takes there will almost cost him his life. Autumn, 1753. Both England and France are eyeing unclaimed wilderness to the west. The British Governor Dinwiddie of Virginia needs a messenger to deliver a warning to French forces moving into the Ohio Valley. At 21, Washington has just joined the Virginia militia, and despite his inexperience, can't resist the opportunity to impress his English superiors. He claims to have great knowledge of the frontier, knowledge that in many cases is greatly exaggerated. But it convinces the governor to commission him with the job. Deep in the Ohio wilderness, Washington meets with the French commander. He delivers the governor's message and is eager to return with the French response. But here, his inexperience and youthful recklessness catch up with him. In an effort to make up time, he decides to split up his party, leaving most of the gear behind with his men. He and a guide named Christopher Gist continue alone through the woods with no protection except their own muskets. They pass a village with the ominous name of Murdering Town. Here, an Indian emerges and offers to guide them through the wilderness. The man proceeds ahead, as if he's looking for something.
doesn't hit anybody, but Washington is stunned. He doesn't know what to do. Gist reacts immediately and is about to blow his head off, but Washington makes him stop.
Washington fears killing the man could spark hostilities between the British and Indians, so he lets him go. He immediately regrets the decision.
Washington starts thinking, well, maybe I shouldn't have let him go after all, because now he's going to go get his friends. So Washington and Gist head off through the woods, going as fast as they can.
They reach the banks of the Allegheny River and decide to build a raft. But it is poorly constructed, and the water treacherous.
They hit some chunks of ice. Washington's off balance. He tumbles into the raging river.
But Gist grabs hold of him, saving his life. The two men crawl onto a tiny island in the center of the river and hunker down for the night. But the miserable conditions prove an unexpected blessing.
The next morning, the two men woke and saw that through the night it had become so cold that the Allegheny had frozen over, and they're able to walk across it. Washington's journal of the entire trip is published and it's distributed throughout the state of Virginia.
This journal is the first in a long line of heroic embellishments. It downplays his mistakes and is carefully crafted to bolster his reputation.
And for the first time in his life, he gets a little bit of fame.
But to truly rise in society, Washington will need more than fame or military success. He'll need connections. And the ambitious young officer will prove adept at gaining them. Among the artifacts recently discovered at George Washington's childhood home, one item stands out: an object intimately linked with a secretive order.
This is a regular middle 18th century English molded clay pipe. But this one's special because it's got a Masonic crest on the inside.
This strange emblem is the sign of the Freemasons, a global fraternity with medieval roots. Washington joins the Fredericksburg Lodge at age 20 and is an active participant. He's attracted to the Masonic philosophy of honesty, moderation, and restraint, taught through the symbolism of masonry tools. But the fraternity also opens new doors for him, allowing access to higher levels of society. He continues his networking through the Virginia militia, where he's presented with another vehicle for advancement: war. Today, George Washington is renowned as a fearless leader and brilliant military tactician. Some of that is true. His courage and bravery live up to the myth.
Most of us are afraid of dying. Washington seemed to be unique in the sense that he faced death a number of times with a calmness that most people would look at as almost otherworldly.
One battle from the French and Indian War will cement his courageous reputation. July 9th, 1755. Washington is a 23-year-old soldier fighting alongside British regulars against French and Indian forces. He accompanies an English advance guard when suddenly they're attacked from the trees. The fighting is close quarters. Gunsmoke obscures their vision. Bullets fly from every direction. a massacre. The British commander, General Braddock, is mortally wounded. His troops panic and scatter.
By the end of the day, every single officer is either dead or wounded, except for Washington. He has bullets going through his jacket, he has a bullet going through his hat, he has horses shot out from under him, but miraculously, he remains unhurt.
Under fire, he bravely takes command and leads the remaining soldiers out of harm's way. The incident gives rise to a legend that he is protected by the Great Spirit and will never die in battle. During this period, Washington also embarks on another type of conquest, the courtship of his future wife. But even here, his passions are bound by his ambition. Although his marriage to Martha is told as one of the great American love stories, more than love fuels their relationship. At 26, Washington knows that marrying a rich widow will give him access to her estate. This means more land, slaves, and opportunity. And Martha Custis is one of the wealthiest widows in all of Virginia.
Remember, Washington is not in the top echelons of Virginia planners. His marriage to Martha will put him in the very top category. There's no question her wealth is one of the really appealing aspects, but Martha is a very appealing figure in other ways. She scores high on her personality and on her physical attractiveness. She's a good catch.
Pursuing Martha makes financial sense for Washington. But some historians believe that even while he courts her, his heart is pulled in a different direction.
George Washington was infatuated with his best friend's wife, Sally Fairfax, George Fairfax's wife. She was beautiful. She was a gorgeous woman. And she flirted with George Washington in person, in letters. And she had him in her snares.
Historians have uncovered a secret note he sent to Sally that reveals his more passionate side. In the letter, he says, "You have drawn me," and warns that the world has no business to know the object of my love.
And he suddenly had to know the one thing that mattered the most to this poor guy at this point. Do you really love me? Do you love me at all? Apparently she treated it like it was a joke.
Washington's love for Sally goes unrequited. His feelings for Martha, however, soon deepen.
Over time, this marriage of convenience turns into a marriage of genuine love and affection.
Washington has finally found his life partner, and at the same time, gained control over 17,000 new acres of land. His life as a farmer is often painted in idyllic terms. But in reality, Washington faces a fierce struggle to free himself from rising debt. At his boyhood home, archaeologists have found artifacts that demonstrate part of the problem.
I have here a piece of an 18th century stoneware beer mug. And this one's nice because it's got the seal of George III, the king who was in power during the American Revolution. It says GR on it. Even though this is the king that ultimately he would remove from the colonies, Washington, like many Virginians, prided himself on his ability to purchase the finest English goods and worked very hard to fill his home with as many of them as he could get a hold of.
To pay for all those English imports, Washington grows tobacco for the English market. But the system unfairly favors the English merchant.
Through his 30s and 40s, he was in debt a great deal. The tobacco industry was manipulated and controlled by London merchants, and he spent much of his life trying to escape from being indebted.
Washington had inherited his Mount Vernon plantation upon the death of his brother Lawrence. And with his marriage to Martha, he becomes one of the largest property owners in all of Virginia. But more land only means more debt. Luckily, he sees a way out of this tobacco trap by switching to wheat, experimenting with fertilizers, crop rotation, and other new farming techniques. Washington saves his family from crushing debt. The lessons he learns here on the farm will later help him during the darkest days of the Revolution. We think of Washington as a great general because in the end, he wins the war. But in the field, Washington is often outmatched by the highly schooled British commanders.
Washington was only a mediocre tactician, and in fact, the British were much better at managing troops in the field than he was. So he ends up losing quite a lot of battles.
When he does win, it's often due to British overconfidence. And sometimes it's because of his experience, not as a field commander, but as a farmer. December 26th, 1776. On the verge of total defeat, Washington crosses the Delaware River and takes Trenton, New Jersey, a much-needed victory. But the British still hold New York City and have amassed a staggering army of 30,000 men. The English commander, General Cornwallis, moves his larger force within striking distance of Washington's meager army.
Lord Cornwallis decided, no, my men are tired, they've been marching all day, I'll attack in the morning and wipe up the landscape with this guy.
Weather conditions have Washington and his army pinned down with no chance of escape.
It had become very warm. All the roads and the fields had turned to mud. He couldn't move his army. His cannon didn't move, his wagons didn't move, he was stuck.
With the British noose tightening around his army, Washington turns to his rural roots.
His knowledge as a farmer saved the Revolution that night. He knew from winds that were blowing in their direction that a frost was on its way. And at some time after midnight, the frost would arrive. And when it did, it would harden the mud, enabling them to evacuate.
Just as he predicted, a drop in temperature freezes the muddy roads. To complete his escape, he then prepares a decoy.
Washington had guys up there in the hills building campfires every 40 or 50 feet. And it gave the impression that they were all there for the night just waiting for this attack. Meanwhile, he withdrew just about every man and they marched in the other direction, completely unknown to the British.
During the early morning hours, the bulk of Washington's army marches over frozen backroads into Princeton, slipping right past the noses of the British Army.
Cornwallis's entire army attacked at 8 a.m. to find nobody. They were gone. The army had made its way all the way to Princeton and attacked the other half of Cornwallis's army there, startling them and achieving another great victory.
Not only did he defeat them, but he made them look stupid. And this reversed the whole revolution in New Jersey, just like that.
But this is not the only time that Washington tricks the British. In fact, his remarkable skills of deception contradict his most famous childhood legend. George Washington is often seen as a man above deceptive practices, too honest and principled to get his hands dirty. But when faced with long odds and high stakes, he reveals a surprising craftiness. George Washington is actually a master of trickery and deception. This duplicity flies in the face of a childhood legend.
We all know the myth of the cherry tree, in which he said, "I cannot tell a lie, I cut it down." During the Revolutionary War, he was the most consummate liar that we've ever had. We call this intelligence.
Despite his dignified image, Washington doesn't mind engaging in the dirty business of espionage. In fact, it thrills him.
Washington was a natural spy master. He really enjoyed ciphers and invisible inks and basically all manner of the dark arts.
He is particularly adept at deceiving the British with disinformation. Morristown, New Jersey, 1777. During a winter encampment, Washington's army shrinks to a few thousand men. Most have left after serving their enlistment. Others have deserted. A major confrontation with English forces now would be disastrous. So Washington comes up with a plan. He knows the British expect him to exaggerate his army size, so he baits them by reporting his forces at 40,000.
And the British knew he didn't have 40,000 men. That's an enormous army. They thought he had very few.